Hello everyone, this is welcome back to Taking the Narrow Path, part 100. Today we're reading 1 Maccabees chapters 11 through 16. As always, let's start off with a prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Let's get started. 1 Maccabees chapter 11. Ptolemy invades Syria. Then the king of Egypt gathered great forces, like the sand by the seashore, and many ships, and he tried to get possession of Alexander's kingdom by trickery, and add it to his own kingdom. He set out for Syria with peaceable words, and the people of the towns opened their gates to him, and went to meet him, for King Alexander had commanded them to meet him. Since he was Alexander's father-in-law, but when Ptolemy entered the towns, he stationed forces as a garrison in each town. When he approached Azotus, they showed him the burnt-out temple of Dagon and Azotus, and its suburbs destroyed, and the corpses lying about, and the charred bodies of those whom Jonathan had burned in the war. For they had piled them in heaps along his route. They also told the king what Jonathan had done, to throw blame on him, but the king kept silent. Jonathan met the king at Joppa with pomp, and they greeted one another, and spent the night there. And Jonathan went with the king as far as the river called Eleutherus. Then he returned to Jerusalem. So King Ptolemy gained control of the coastal cities as far as Seleucia by the sea, and he kept devising wicked designs against Alexander. He sent envoys to King Demetrius, saying, "Come, let us make a covenant with each other, and I will give you in marriage my daughter, who was Alexander's wife. And you shall reign over your father's kingdom. I now regret that I gave him my daughter, for he has tried to kill me." He threw blame on Alexander because he coveted his kingdom, so he took his daughter away from him and gave her to Demetrius. He was a stranger. He was estranged from Alexander, and their enmity became manifest. Then Ptolemy entered Antioch and put on the crown of Asia. Thus he put two crowns on his head, the crown of Egypt and that of Asia. Now King Alexander was in Cilicia at the time, because the people of the region were in revolt. When Alexander heard of it, he came against him in battle. Ptolemy marched out and met him with a strong force and put him to flight. So Alexander fled into Arabia to find protection there, and King Ptolemy was triumphant. Zabdiel the Arab cut off the head of Alexander and sent it to Ptolemy. But King Ptolemy died 3 days later, and his troops in the strongholds were killed by the inhabitants of the strongholds. So Demetrius became king in the 167th year. Jonathan's diplomacy. In those days Jonathan assembled the Judeans to attack the citadel in Jerusalem, and he built many engines of war to use against it. But certain renegades who hated their nation went to the king and reported to him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. When he heard this, he was angry, and as soon as he heard it, he sent out and came to Ptolemais, and he wrote to order Jonathan not to continue the siege, but to meet him for a conference at Ptolemais as quickly as possible. When Jonathan heard this, he gave orders to continue the siege. He chose some of the elders of Israel and some of the priests, and put himself in danger, for he went to the king at Ptolemais, taking silver and gold and clothing and numerous other gifts, and he won his favor. Although certain renegades of his nation kept making complaints against him, the king treated him as his predecessors had treated him. He exalted him in the presence of all his friends. He confirmed him in the high priesthood, and in as many other honors as he had formerly had, and caused him to be be reckoned among his chief friends. Then Jonathan asked the king to free Judea and the 3 districts of Samaria from tribute, and promised him 300 talents. The king consented and wrote a letter to Jonathan about all these things. Its contents were as follows. King Demetrius to his brother Jonathan, and to the nation of the Jews, greetings. This is a copy of the letter that he wrote concerning you to our kinsmen. Last things we have written to you also, so that you may know what it says. King Demetrius to his father, last things, greetings. We have determined to do good to the nation of the Jews, who are our friends, and fulfill their obligations to us. Because of the goodwill they show toward us, we have confirmed as their possession both the territory of Judea and the 3 districts of Ephraim and Lida and Rethamim, the latter with all the region bordering them, were added to Judea from Samaria. To all those who sacrifice in Jerusalem we have granted release from the royal taxes that the king formerly received from them each year, from the crops of the land and the fruit of the trees, and the other payments henceforth due to us of the tithes and the taxes due to us, and the salt pits and the crown taxes due to us. From all these we shall grant them release, and not one of these grants shall be cancelled from this time on forever. Now therefore take care to make a copy of this, and let it be given to Jonathan, and put up in a conspicuous place on the holy mountain. The intrigue of Trypho. When King Demetrius saw that the land was quiet before him, and that there was no opposition to him, he dismissed all his troops, all of them to their own homes, except the foreign troops that he had recruited from the islands of the nations. So all the troops who had served under his predecessors hated him. A certain Trypho had formerly been one of Alexander's supporters. He saw that all the troops were grumbling against Demetrius. So he went to Imelco the Arab, who was bringing up Antiochus, the young son of Alexander, and insistently urged him to hand Antiochus over to him to become king in place of his father. He also reported to Imelco what Demetrius had done, and told of the hatred that the troops of Demetrius had for him, and he stayed there for many days. Now Jonathan sent to King Demetrius the request that he remove the troops of the citadel from Jerusalem, and the troops in the strongholds, for they kept fighting against Israel. Excuse me. And Demetrius sent this message back to Jonathan. Not only will I do these things for you and your nation, but I will confer great honor on you and your nation, if I find an opportunity. Now then, you will do well to send me men who will help me, for all my troops have revolted. So Jonathan sent 3,000 stalwart men to him at Antioch. And when they came to the king rejoiced at their arrival. And the people of the city assembled within the city to the number of 120,000, and they wanted to kill the king. But the king fled into the palace. Then the people of the city seized the main streets of the city and began to fight. So the king called the Jews to his aid, and they all rallied around him, and then spread out through the city. They killed on that day about 100,000. They set fire to the city and seized a large amount of spoil on that day, and saved the king. When the people of the city saw that the Jews had gained control of the city as they pleased, their courage failed, and they cried out to the king with his entreaty, "Grant us peace, and make the Jews stop fighting against us in our city." And they threw down their arms and made peace. So the Jews gained glory in the sight of the king and of all the people in his kingdom. And they returned to Jerusalem with a large amount of spoil. So King Demetrius sat on the throne of his kingdom, and the land was quiet before him. But he broke his word about all that he had promised. He became estranged from Jonathan, and did not repay the favors that Jonathan had done him, but treated him very harshly. Trypho seizes power. After this, Trypho returned, and with him the young boy Antiochus, who began to reign and put on the crown. All the troops that Demetrius had discharged gathered around him. They fought against Demetrius, and he fled and was routed. Trypho captured the elephants and gained control of Antioch. Then young Antiochus wrote to Jonathan, saying, I confirm you in the high priesthood and set you over the 4 districts and make you one of the king's friends. He also sent him gold plates and a table service, and granted him the right to drink from gold cups and dress in purple and wear a gold buckle. He appointed Jonathan's brother Simon governor from the ladder of Tyre to the borders of Egypt. Campaigns of Jonathan and Simon. Then Jonathan set out and traveled beyond the river and among the towns, and all the army of Syria gathered to him as allies. When he came to Ascalon, the people of the city met him and paid him honor. From there he went to Gaza, but the people of Gaza shut him out. So he besieged it and burned its suburbs with fire and plundered them. When the people of Gaza pleaded with Jonathan, and he made peace with them, and took the sons of their rulers as hostages, and sent them to Jerusalem, and he passed through the country as far as Damascus. Then Jonathan heard that the officers of Demetrius had come to Kadesh in Galilee with a large army, intending to remove him from office. He went to meet them, but left his brother Simon in the country. Simon encamped before Bethzer and fought against it for many days and hemmed it in. Then they asked him to grant them terms of peace, and he did so. He removed them from there, took possession of the town, and set a garrison over it. Jonathan and his army encamped by the waters of Gennesaret. Early in the morning they marched to the plain of Hazor, and there in the plain the army of the foreigners met him. They had set an ambush against him in the mountains, but they themselves met him face to face. Then the men in ambush emerged from their places and joined battle. All the men with Jonathan fled. Not one of them was left except Methathias, son of Absalom, and Judas, son of Chalphi, commanders of the forces of the army. Jonathan tore his clothes, put dust on his head, and prayed. Then he turned back to the battle against the enemy and routed them, and they fled. When his men who were fleeing saw this, they returned to him and joined him in the pursuit as far as Kadesh to their camp, and there they encamped. As many as 3,000 to the foreigners fell that day, and Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. First Maccabees chapter 12. Alliances with Rome and Sparta. Now, when Jonathan saw that the times was favorable for him, he chose men and sent them to Rome to confirm and renew their friendship with them. He also sent letters to the same effect to the Spartans and to other places. So they went to Rome and entered the Senate chamber and said, The high priest Jonathan and the Jewish nation have sent us to renew the former friendship and alliance with them. And the Romans gave them letters to the people in every place, asking them to provide for the envoys safe conduct to the land of Judah. This is a copy of the letter that Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. The high priest Jonathan, the senate of the nation, the priests and the rest of the Jewish people, to their brothers, the Spartans, greetings. Already in time past, a letter was sent to the high priest Onias from Arius, who was king among you, stating that you are our brothers, as the appended copy shows. Onias welcomed the envoy with honor and received the letter, which contained a clear declaration of alliance and friendship. Therefore, though we have no need of these things, since we have as encouragement the holy books that are in our hands, we have undertaken to send to renew our family ties and friendship with you, so that we may not become estranged from you. For considerable time has passed since you sent your letter to us. We therefore remember you constantly on every occasion, both at our festivals and on other appropriate days, at the sacrifices that we offer in our prayers, as it is right and proper to remember brothers, and we rejoice in your glory. But as for ourselves, many trials and many wars have encircled us. The kings around us have waged war against us. We were unwilling to annoy you and our other allies and friends with these wars, for we have the help that comes from heaven for our aid. And so we were delivered from our enemies, and our enemies were humbled. We therefore have chosen Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, and have sent them to Rome to renew our former friendship and alliance with them. We have commanded them to go also to you and greet you and deliver to you this letter from us concerning the renewal of our family ties. And now please send us a reply to this. This is a copy of the letter that they sent to Onias, King Arius of the Spartans. To the high priest Onias, greetings. It has been found in writing concerning the Spartans and the Jews that they are brothers and are of the family of Abraham. And now that we have learned this, please write us concerning your welfare. We, on our part, write to you that your livestock and your property belong to us, and ours belong to you. We therefore command that our envoys report to you accordingly. Further campaigns of Jonathan and Simon. Now Jonathan heard that the commanders of Demetrius had returned with a larger force than before to wage war against him. So he marched away from Jerusalem and met them in the region of Hamath, for he gave them no opportunity to invade his own country. He sent spies to their camp, and they returned and reported to him that the enemy were being drawn up in formation to attack the Jews by night. So when the sun had set, Jonathan commanded his troops to be alert and to keep their arms at hand so as to be ready all night for battle. And he stationed outposts around the camp. When the enemy heard that Jonathan and his troops were prepared for battle, they were afraid and were terrified at heart. So they kindled fires in their camp and withdrew. But Jonathan and his troops did not know until morning, for they saw the fires burning. Then Jonathan pursued them, but he did not overtake them, for they had crossed the Eleutherus river. So Jonathan turned aside against the Arabs who are called Zebudenes, and he crushed them and plundered them. Then he broke camp and went to Damascus and marched through all that region. Simon also went out and marched through the country as far as Ascalon. In the neighboring strongholds, he turned aside to Joppa and took it by surprise, for he had heard that they were ready to hand over the stronghold to those who Demetrius had sent, and he stationed a garrison there to guard it. When Jonathan returned, he convened the elders of the people and planned with them to build strongholds in Judea, to build the walls of Jerusalem still higher, and to erect a high barrier between the citadel and the city to separate it from the city, in order to isolate it so that its garrison could neither buy nor sell. So they gathered together to rebuild the city. Part of the wall on the valley to the east had fallen, and he repaired the section called Chephanetha. Simon also built Adida in the Shephelah. He fortified it and installed gates with bolts. Trypho captures Jonathan. Then Trypho attempted to become king in Asia and put on the crown, and to raise his hand against King Antiochus. He feared that Jonathan might not permit him to do so, but might make war on him. So he kept seeking to seize and kill him. And he marched out and came to Bethshan. Jonathan went out to meet him with 40,000 picked warriors, and he came to Bethshan. When Trypho saw that he had come with a large army, he was afraid to raise his hand against him. So he received him with honor and commended him to all his friends. And he gave him gifts and commanded his friends and his troops to obey him as they would himself. Then he said to Jonathan, Why have you put all these people to so much trouble when we are not at war? Dismiss them now to their homes and choose for yourself a few men to stay with you, and come with me to Ptolemais. I will hand it over to you as well as the other strongholds, and the remaining troops and all the officers. I will turn around and go home, for that is why I am here. Jonathan trusted him and did as he said. He sent away the troops, and they returned to the land of Judah. He kept with himself 3,000 men, 2,000 of whom he left in Galilee, while 1,000 accompanied him. But when Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the people of Ptolemais closed the gates and seized him, and they killed with the sword all who had entered with him. Then Trypho sent troops and cavalry into Galilee and the great plain to destroy all of Jonathan's soldiers. But they realized that Jonathan had been seized and had perished along with his men, and they encouraged one another and kept marching in close formation, ready for battle. When their pursuers saw that they would fight for their lives, they turned back. So they all reached the land of Judah safely, and they mourned for Jonathan and his companions, and were in great fear, and all Israel mourned deeply. All the nations around them tried to destroy them, for they said, "They have no leader or helper. Now therefore let us make war on them and blot out the memory of them from humankind." 1 Maccabees chapter 13. Simon takes command. Simon heard that Trypho had assembled a large army to invade the land of Judah and destroy it, and he saw that the people were trembling with fear. So he went up to Jerusalem, and gathering the people together, he encouraged them, saying to them, "You yourselves know what great things my brothers and I and the house of my father have done for the laws and the sanctuary. You know also the wars and the difficulties that my brothers and I have seen. By reason of this, all my brothers have perished for the sake of Israel, and I alone am left. And now, far be it from me to spare my life in any time of distress, for I am not better than my brothers. But I will avenge my nation and the sanctuary and your wives and children, for all the nations have gathered together out of hatred to destroy us." The spirit of the people was rekindled when they heard these words, and they answered in a loud voice, "You are our leader in place of Judas and your brother Jonathan. Fight our battles, and all that you say to us we will do." So he assembled all the warriors and hurried to complete the walls of Jerusalem, and he fortified it on every side. He sent Jonathan, son of Absalom, to Joppa, and with him a considerable army. He drove out its occupants and remained there. Deceit and treachery of Trypho. Then Trypho left Ptolemais with a large army to invade the land of Judah, and Jonathan was with him under guard. Simon encamped in Adida, facing the plain. Trypho learned that Simon had risen up in place of his brother Jonathan, and that he was about to join battle with him. So he sent envoys to him and said, "It is for the money that your brother Jonathan owed the royal treasury in connection with the officers he held that we are detaining him. Send now 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages, so that when released he will not revolt against us, and we will release him." Simon knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him, but he sent to get money and the sons, so that he would not arouse great hostility among the people, who might say, "It was because Simon did not send him the money and the sons that Jonathan perished." So he sent the sons and the 100 talents, but Trypho broke his word and did not release Jonathan. After this, Trypho came to invade the country and destroy it, and he circled around by the way to Adora. But Simon and his army kept marching along opposite him to every place he went. Now the men in the citadel kept sending envoys to Trypho, urging him to come to them by the way of the wilderness, and to send them food. So Trypho got all his cavalry ready to go, but that night a very heavy snow fell, and he did not go because of the snow. He marched off and went into the land of Gilead. When he approached Bethsgamma, he killed Jonathan, and he was buried there. Then Trypho turned and went back to his own land. Jonathan's tomb. Simon sent and took the bones of his brother Jonathan and buried him in Modian, in the city of his ancestors. All Israel bewailed him with great lamentation and mourned for him for many days. And Simon built a monument over the tomb of his father and his brothers. He made it high so that it might be seen with polished stone at the front and back. He also erected 7 pyramids opposite one another for his father and mother and 4 brothers. For the pyramids he devised an elaborate setting, erecting about them great columns, and on the columns he put suits of armor for a permanent memorial, and beside the suits of armor he carved ships so that they could be seen by all who sail the sea. This is the tomb that he built in Modian. It remains to this day. Judea gains independence. Trypho dealt treacherously with the young king Antiochus. He killed him and became king in his place, putting on the crown of Asia. And he brought great calamity on the land. But Simon built up the strongholds of Judea and walled them all around. with high towers and great walls. and gates and bolts, and he stored food in the strongholds. Simon also chose emissaries and sent them to King Demetrius with a request to grant relief to the country, for all that Trypho did was to plunder. King Demetrius sent him a favorable reply to this request, and wrote him a letter as follows. King Demetrius to Simon, the high priest and friend of kings, and to the elders and nation of the Jews, greetings. We have received the golden crown and the palm branch that you sent, and we are ready to make a general peace with you, and to write to our officials to grant you release from tribute. All the grants that we have made to you remain valid, and let the strongholds that you have built be your possession. We pardon any errors and offenses committed to this day, and cancel the crown tax that you owe, and whatever other tax has been collected in Jerusalem shall be collected no longer. And if any of you are qualified to be enrolled in our bodyguard, let them be enrolled, and let there be peace between us. In the 170th year, the yoke of the Gentiles was removed from Israel, and the people began to write in their documents and contracts in the first year of Simon, the great high priest and commander and leader of the Jews. The capture of Gazara by Simon. In those days Simon encamped against Gazara and surrounded it with troops. He made a siege engine, brought it up to the city, and battered. Sorry, did I skip one? And battered and captured one tower. The men in the siege engine leapt out in the city, and a great tumult arose in the city. The men in the city with their wives and children went up on the wall with their clothes torn, and they cried out with a loud voice, asking Simon to make peace with them. They said, "Do not treat us according to our wicked acts, but according to your mercy." So Simon reached an agreement with them and stopped fighting against them. But he expelled them from the city and cleansed the houses in which the idols were located, and then entered it with hymns and praise. He removed all uncleanliness from it, and settled in it those who observed the law. He also strengthened its fortifications and built in it a house for himself. Simon regains the citadel at Jerusalem. Those who were in the citadel at Jerusalem were prevented from going in and out to buy and sell in the country, so they were very hungry, and many of them perished from famine. Then they cried to Simon to make peace with them. And he did so, but he expelled them from there and cleansed the citadel from its pollutions. On the 23rd day of the second month in the 171st year, the Jews entered it with praise and palm branches, and with harps and cymbals and stringed instruments, and with hymns and songs, because a great enemy had been crushed and removed from Israel. Simon decreed that every year they should celebrate this day with rejoicing. He strengthened the fortifications of the temple hill alongside the citadel, and he and his men lived there. Simon saw that his son John had reached manhood. Simon saw that his son John had reached manhood, and so he made him commander of all the forces, and he lived at Gazara. 1 Maccabees chapter 14, capture of Demetrius. In the 172nd year, King Demetrius assembled his forces and marched into Media to obtain help, so that he could make war against Trypho. When King Arsaces of Persia and Media heard that Demetrius had invaded his territory, he sent one of his generals to take him alive. The general went and defeated the army of Demetrius, and seized him and took him to Arsaces, who put him under guard. The eulogy of Simon. The land had rest all the days of Simon. He sought the good of his nation. His rule was pleasing to them, as was the honor shown him all his days. To crown all his honors, he took Joppa for a harbor and opened a way to the isles of the sea. He extended the borders of his nation and gained full control of the country. He gathered a host of captives. He ruled over Gazara and Bethzur and the citadel, and he removed its uncleanliness from it. And there was none to oppose him. They tilled their land in peace. The ground gave its increase, and the trees of the plains their fruit. Old men sat in the streets, they all talked together of good things, and the youth put on splendid military attire. He supplied the towns with food and furnished them with the means of defense, until his renown spread to the ends of the earth. He established peace in the land, and Israel rejoiced with great joy. All the people sat under their own vines and fig trees, and there was none to make them afraid. No one was left in the land to fight them, and the kings were crushed in those days. He gave help to all the humble among his people. He sought out the law and did away with all the renegades and outlaws. He made the sanctuary glorious and added to the vessels of the sanctuary. Diplomacy with Rome and Sparta. It was heard in Rome and as far away as Sparta that Jonathan had died, and they were deeply grieved when they heard that his brother Simon had become high priest in his stead, and that he was ruling over the country and the towns in it. They wrote to him on bronze tablets to renew with him the friendship and alliance that they had established with his brothers Judas and Jonathan. And these were read before the assembly in Jerusalem. This is a copy of the letter that the Spartans sent. The rulers and the city of the Spartans to the high priest Simon, and to the elders and the priests elders and the priests and the rest of the Jewish people, our brothers, greetings. The envoys who were sent to our people have told us about your glory and honor, and we rejoiced at their coming. We have recorded what they said in our public decrees, as follows: Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, envoys of the Jews, have come to us to renew their friendship with us. It has pleased our people to receive these men with honor, and to put a copy of their words in the public archives, so that the people of the Spartans may have record of them. And they have sent a copy of this to the high priest Simon. After this, Simon sent Numenius to Rome with a large gold shield weighing 1,000 minas to confirm that alliance with the Romans. Official honors for Simon. When the people heard these things said, "How shall we thank Simon and his sons? For he and his brothers and the house of his father have stood firm. They have fought and repulsed Israel's enemies and established its freedom." So they made a record on bronze tablets and put it on pillars on Mount Zion. This is a copy of what they wrote. On the 18th day of Elul, in the 172nd year, in the 172nd year, which is the third year of the great high priest Simon, in Asaramo, in the great assembly of the priests and the people and the rulers of the nations and the elders of the country, the following was proclaimed to us. Since wars often occurred in this country, Simon, son of Matthias, a priest of the sons of Jorib, and his brothers, exposed themselves to danger and resisted the enemies of the nation, in order that their sanctuary and the law might be preserved. And they brought great glory to their nation. Jonathan rallied the nation, became their high priest, and was gathered to his people. When their enemies decided to invade their country and lay hands on their sanctuary, then Simon rose up and fought for his nation. He spent great sums of his own money. He armed the soldiers of his nation and paid them wages. He fortified the towns of Judea and Bethzur on the borders of Judea, where formerly the arms of the enemy had been stored, and he placed there a garrison of Jews. He also fortified Joppa, which is by the sea, and Gazara, which is on the border of Azotus, where the enemy formerly lived. He settled Jews there and provided in those towns whatever was necessary for their restoration. The people saw Simon's faithfulness and the glory that he had resolved to win for his nation, and they made him their leader and high priest, because he had done all these things and because of the justice and loyalty that he had maintained towards his nation. He sought in every way to exalt his people. In his days things prospered in his hands, so that the Gentiles were put out of the country, as were also those in the city of David in Jerusalem. Who had built themselves a citadel from which they used to sally forth and defile the environs of the sanctuary, doing great damage to its purity. He settled Jews in it, and fortified it for the safety of the country and of the city, and built the walls of Jerusalem higher. In view of these things, King Demetrius confirmed him in the high priesthood, made him one of his friends, and paid him high honors. For he had heard that the Jews were addressed by the Romans as friends and allies and brothers, and that the Romans had received the envoys of Simon with honor. The Jews and their priests have resolved that Simon should be their leader and high priest forever, until a trustworthy prophet should arise, and that he should be governor over them, and that he should take charge of the sanctuary and appoint officials over its tasks and over the country and the weapons and the strongholds, and that he should take charge of the sanctuary, and that he should be obeyed by all, and that all contracts in the country should be written in his name, and that he should be clothed in purple and wear gold. None of the people or priests shall be permitted to nullify any of these decisions, or to oppose what he says, or to convene an assembly in the country without his permission, or to be clothed in purple, or put on a gold buckle. Whoever acts contrary to these decisions, or rejects any of them, shall be liable to punishment. All the people agreed to grant Simon the right to act in accordance with these decisions. So Simon accepted and agreed to be high priest, to be commander and ethnarch of the Jews and priests, and to be protector of them all. And they gave orders to inscribe this decree on bronze tablets, to put them up in a conspicuous place in the precincts of the sanctuary, and to deposit copies of them in the treasury, so that Simon and his sons might have them. 1 Maccabees chapter 15. Letter of Antiochus the 7th, I believe. Antiochus, son of King Demetrius, sent a letter from the islands of the sea to Simon, the priest and ethnarch of the Jews, and to all the nations. Its contents were as follows: King Antiochus to Simon, the high priest and ethnarch of the ethnarch and to the nation of the Jews, greetings. Whereas certain scoundrels have gained control of the kingdom of our ancestors, and I intend to lay claim to the kingdom, so that I may restore it as formerly was, and have recruited a host of mercenary troops, and have equipped warships, and intend to make a landing in the country, so that I may proceed against those who have destroyed our country, and those who have devastated many cities in my kingdom. Now therefore I confirm to you all the tax remissions that the kings before me have granted you, and release from all the other payments from which they have released you. I permit you to mint your own coinage as money for your country, and I grant freedom to Jerusalem and the sanctuary. All the weapons that you have prepared and the strongholds that you have built and now hold shall remain yours. Every debt you owe to the royal treasury and any such future debt shall be cancelled for you from henceforth and for all time. When we gain control of our kingdom, we will bestow great honor on you and your nation and the temple, so that your glory will become manifest in all the earth. In the 174th year, Antiochus set out and invaded the land of his ancestors. All the troops rallied to him, so that there was only a few with Trypho. Antiochus pursued him, and Trypho came in his flight to Dor, which is by the sea, for he knew that troubles had converged on him, and his troops had deserted him. So Antiochus encamped against Dor, and with him were 120,000 warriors and 8,000 cavalry. He surrounded the town, and the ships joined battle from the sea. He pressed the town hard from land and sea, and permitted no one to leave or enter it. Rome supports the Jews. The Numenius and his companions arrived from Rome with the letters to the kings and countries, in which the following was written: Lucius, consul of the Romans, To King Ptolemy, greetings. The envoys of the Jews have come to us as our friends and allies to renew our ancient friendship and alliance. They have been sent by the high priest Simon and by the Jewish people, and have brought a gold shield weighing 1,000 minas. We therefore have decided to write to the kings and countries that they should not seek their harm, or make war against them and their cities and their country, or make alliance with those who war against them. And it has seemed good to us to accept the shield from them. Therefore, if any scoundrels have fled to you from their country, hand them over to the high priest Simon, so that he may punish them according to their law. The consul wrote the same thing to King Demetrius and to the Attalus and Ariarathes and Arsacius, and to all the countries, and to Samsams, and to the Spartans, and to Delos, and the Mindos, and to Sicyon, and to Caria, and to Samos, and to Pamphylia, and to Lycia, and to Halicarnassus, and to Rhodes, and to Phasaelis, and to Cos, and to Side, and to Aradus, and to Gortina, and to Cnidus, and to Cyprus, and to Cyrene. And they also sent a copy of these things to the high priest Simon. Antiochus the seventh threatened Simon. King Antiochus besieged Dor for the second time, continually throwing his forces against it and making engines of war. And he shut Trypho up and kept him from going out or in. And Simon sent to Antiochus 2,000 picked troops to fight for him, and silver and gold and a large amount of military equipment. But he refused to receive them and broke all the agreements he formerly had made with Simon, and became estranged from him. He sent to him Anthenobius and one of his friends to confer with him, saying, "You hold control of Joppa and Gazara and the citadel in Jerusalem. They are cities of my kingdom. You have devastated their territory. You have done great damage in the land, and you have taken possession of many places in my kingdom. Now then, hand over the cities that you have seized and the tribute money to the places that you have conquered, outside the borders of Judea. Or else pay me 500 talents of silver for the destruction that you have caused, and 500 talents more for the tribute money of the cities. Otherwise we will come and make war on you." So Anthenobius, the king's friend, came to Jerusalem, and when he saw the splendor of Simon, and the sideboard with its gold and silver plate, and his great magnificence, he was amazed. When he reported to him the king's message, Simon said to him in reply, "We have neither taken foreign land nor seized foreign property, but only the inheritance of our ancestors, which at one time had been unjustly taken by our enemies. Now that we have the opportunity, we are firmly holding the inheritance of our ancestors. As for Joppa and Gazara, which you demand, they were causing great damage among the people and to our land. For them we will give you 100 talents. Anthenobius did not answer him a word, but returned in wrath to the king and reported to him these words, and also the splendor of Simon, and all that he had seen. And the king was very angry. Victory over Sendebius. Meanwhile, Trypho embarked on a ship and escaped to Orthosia. Then the king made Sendebius commander-in-chief of the coastal country, and gave him troops of infantry and cavalry. He commanded him to encamp against Judea, to build up Kedron and fortify its gates, and to make war on the people. But the king pursued Trypho, so Sendebius came to Jamnia and began to provoke the people and invade Judea, and take the people captive and kill them. He built up Kedron and stationed horsemen and troops there, so that they might go out and make raids along the highways of Judea, as the king had ordered them. 1 Maccabees chapter 16. John went up from Gazara and reported to his father Simon what Sendebius had done. And Simon called in his 2 eldest sons, Judas and John, and said to them, "My brothers and I and my father's house have fought the wars of Israel from our youth until this day, and things have prospered in our hands, so that we have delivered Israel many times. But now I have grown old, and you, by heaven's mercy, are mature in years. Take my place and my brothers, and go out and fight for our nation, and may the help that comes from heaven be with you." So John chose out of the country 20,000 warriors and cavalry, and they marched against Maccabees and camped for the night in Modian. Early in the morning they started out and marched into the plain, where a large force of infantry and cavalry was coming to meet them, and a stream lay between them. Then he and his army lined up against them. He saw that the soldiers were afraid to cross the stream, so he crossed over first, and when his troops saw him, they crossed over after him. Then he divided the army and placed the cavalry in the center of the infantry, for the cavalry of the enemy were very numerous. They sounded the trumpets, and Maccabees and his army were put to flight. Many of them fell wounded, and the rest fell into the stronghold. At that time Judas, the brother of John, was wounded, but John pursued them until Maccabees reached Kedron, which he had built. They also fled into the towers that were in the fields of Azotus, and John burned it with fire, and about 2,000 of them fell. He then returned to Judea safely. Murder of Simon and his sons. Now Ptolemy, son of Abubis, had been appointed governor over the plain of Jericho. He had a large store of silver and gold, for he was son-in-law of the high priest. His heart was lifted up. He determined to get control of the country and made treacherous plans against Simon and his sons to do away with them. Now Simon was visiting the towns of the country and attending to their needs. And he went down to Jericho with his sons Mattathias and Judas in the 177th year, in the 11th month, which is the month of Shebat. The son of Abubis received them treacherously in the little stronghold called Doc, which he had built. He gave them a great banquet and hid men there. When Simon and his sons were drunk, Ptolemy and his men rose up, took their weapons, rushed in against Simon in the banqueting hall, and killed him and his 2 sons, as well as some of his servants. So he committed an act of great treachery and returned evil for good. John succeeds Simon. Then Ptolemy wrote a report about these things and sent it to the king, asking him to send troops to aid him and to turn over to him the towns and the country. He sent other troops to Gazara to do away with John. He sent letters to the captains asking them to come to him, so that he might give them silver and gold and gifts. And he sent other troops to take possession of Jerusalem and the Temple Hill. But someone ran ahead and reported to John at Gazara that his father and brothers had perished, and that he has sent men to kill you also. When he heard this, he was greatly shocked. He seized the men who came to destroy him and killed them, for he had found out that they were seeking to destroy him. The rest of the acts of John and his wars, and the brave deeds that he did, and the building of the walls that he completed, and his achievements are written in the annals of his high priesthood, from the time that he became high priest after his father. 1 second, be right back. Let us close out with a prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Thank you all for reading with me and being here with me today. I love you all, and I hope and pray you are still following Jesus Christ's path. We just finished 1 Maccabees. Next we're going to read 2 Maccabees, which is, 15 chapters, so three readings. Which the Catholic Bible does not have the third Maccabees, but I have an Orthodoxy and Ethiopian Bible as well, and they have the third Maccabees. I don't know which book I'm going to use yet, but one of them I'm going to use, and they have the third Maccabees, which I'm going to switch to that when we get there. But yeah, so the next three will be the second Maccabees, and this was my 100th video. So for any of you out there reading with me and following along with me, thank you so very much. And I only hope and pray that you are putting your faith and your trust in Christ. Putting your faith and trust in Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They will not steer you wrong. They will make you grow. Sometimes growth is painful, but it's all for the betterment. It's all for the good. And it is hard to turn away from your sin, but with them you can. And just keep following them. It's the best thing you can do for your life. Be a shining example to the people around you, to keep them on that path as well, to turn them from their path that they're going down to a path with Christ. It is the best thing for them and for yourself, for anyone that you care about, for everybody in the world. We are called to care for everybody, to love everybody as we love ourselves. I love you all, and I hope you have a good night, and I'll see you next time.